As probably the last video in this lecture series, I would like to talk a little bit about how you could fine-tune your render and preview settings to get efficiently the most out of your render task. And I mentioned that before. For example, inside light paths, you can set the bounces down to 4 and minimum to 0 to accelerate the preview rendering. And you see that, for example, in my case, for preview, I only have 2 samples because I don't really necessarily need more to get a good idea about if my scene looks good or not. But then you see for rendering, I have 400. And I could also, for final rendering, maybe set this one to 8 and 3 or play with the settings. Those all are a little bit more, how could I say that, based on your scene. And so I can't really necessarily give a general rule. Maybe just by playing with them, you can get a feeling for it. But honestly, I don't really change those a lot, but mainly play with those. On the left side, you see a finished rendering, and this one took roughly 10 minutes for that size on my somewhat 5-year-old computer. That's actually not too bad. And overall, the rendering looks pretty good. But as you can see, there's a little bit of noise in the darker areas, kind of like the shadow. The rim has a lot of noise, and the side part here of the reflection. Now, there are 2 different cases how you could present a picture. Online, as a digital image, and in that case, you might want to then have the samples set higher, so this area clears up better. And the other scenario is when you print it. So if I would send this to, let's say, a laser printer to print, this noise I can see inside my rendering might actually not be visible because the laser printer has a printing grain on its own. So it's not necessarily required to render your rendering perfectly smooth when, for example, you're going to print it. Now, for example, as you can see, this area here and here, all that actually looks pretty good. But let's say this area you would like to refine. Well, instead of rendering everything again, I could, for example, go ahead and go to Image, Save Image As, go to my desktop, and for example, I call this one now Car Full, and click Save. And then inside my camera, I could go ahead to here, press Shift B, and then draw a selection over this area, and maybe set this one to 600, and then press F12 to render. Because what happens is with Shift B inside the camera view, you can mark an area which you only render. And you can see here how the rest of the scene is not being rendered, but just that particular part is being rendered only. And of course, I can let this one continue to finish to render. And then once it's done, and I like the cleaner result, I could go to Image, Save Image As, and then, for example, in Photoshop, position this picture over my other image, make the edges maybe blurry so it blends together, and then this way selectively clean up certain parts of my image that maybe I feel need more samples to have a better look. So in general, that's a much better approach to get kind of like the render quality you're looking for than just re-rendering the whole scene again and again and again. And it's just better to just then pick parts that maybe have some issues, refine those, and then in Photoshop, copy and paste those image parts together.